Welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here, practicing in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Uh, I got some pushback yesterday on my fake background, so I'm going to give you my natural background. It can be a little messy in here because we have a bunch of kids, so that's why I don't always put the background on, but hopefully you like this. Um, so sorry I'm running a little late today. I was dealing with some technical issues with my setup, but I think we've got it working here. So bright and early today. I hope everyone had a great week and is looking forward to a great weekend. I'm heading over to Wisconsin Dells later today, taking the family over. A couple of our boys shoot archery, and there's a tournament over there, so I'll be heading over there. I plan to live stream tomorrow morning from somewhere in the hotel, someplace. So I won't wake up the kids. So anyway, today's topic is I saw in the news. This is a weird case. No, it's tragic for sure, but it's got a weird flavor. So let's get the tragic part out of it first. Um, for anyone that lives in Amish country, so we live in Amish country. You know what it's like to share the road with Amish buggies and wagons and things like that. And it seems like a lot of times we live on, in areas where the roads don't have wide shoulders. There's hills, there's curves. I've had close calls myself with the Amish. A few years back, so we live in western Wisconsin. And it's a very old order, I think is what they call it, but a very old order traditional Amish community around us, which means that they are sort of the least likely to adopt conventions and things such as safety features, to the point where up until a few years ago they would have the slow moving vehicle sign, but their like rear lights, their red lights on the back, were literally glass bulbs with a candle or some sort of a kerosene little thing in there, and it was hard to see them when it was clear at night, much less you add in fog and snow. Um, but they had so many tragic crashes, people just couldn't see them. That thank goodness they went to a battery LED operated light system. Still not great, but a lot better than it was. I think it has greatly reduced the number of rear end crashes. But as you can imagine, when an Amish buggy gets rear ended, it's almost always a very bad and serious deal for whoever was in the buggy. A lot of times there's a death or serious injury. A lot of times the horse or horses are badly injured or killed. And so it's just a reality of life around here. And I think it's only getting a little worse as people become a little more distracted with stuff while we're driving. So it's really, when you see those Amish buggy signs, pay attention to them because there's probably a lot around. I mean, when you have a community, you're going to have a lot of them. So today's show, I wanted to talk about a crash that happened in Minnesota. Not far from here. I thought I had the city here. Um, it's south. There's an Amish community south of Rochester, Minnesota, down in the southeast corner of the state, not far from here. I've driven through there many times, and there was a let me see here if I can pull up the picture. I think this is an actual picture of the scene. So it's in Fillmore County. Here is the here's the sign that you often see, and I assume this is. I did see some other pictures, and I think it was where they had maybe come up over a hill. There's actually decent shoulders here. Some of the roads around us, the shoulders are so narrow that, man, they're just right there on the road with you. And so, unfortunately, uh, a young woman came up over the hill and rear-ended this buggy. And as I understand it, there was four kids in it. I think I think the oldest kid was operating the buggy, and I believe two of the children were killed in that. So it was a wrongful death case, a homicide or whatever. And so it was, a real tragic situation. Two of the kids died. I imagine the other two were injured. And what what made this what the reason the story was so interesting is the let me see if I can present this other picture here. I thought I had this ready to go, but I didn't. Here we go. So the I'm not sure which is which. These are twin sisters apparently. It is Sarah and Samantha Peterson. I don't know if they were in the vehicle at the same time. It seems like they were, but apparently Samantha was driving, and Samantha was intoxicated at the time, and I believe had some other drugs and substances in her system. I believe that's correct. And Sarah, her twin sister, was not. And somehow after the crash, I don't know, at the scene or whatever, they like switched clothes. Not sure why they did that, but they switched clothes, and Sarah took the blame. Um, took the blame and was criminally charged, like with um, negligent homicide or something like that. Um, I mean, I don't know what they thought they were going to accomplish here, but they were. Sarah was going to take the fall for her twin sister, and maybe they thought that it was not going to be a big deal. So Sarah was criminally charged, and then somewhere in the process, I don't know, she decided I'm not doing this anymore. But then eyes turned to Samantha, and then Samantha was charged with criminal vehicular homicide, DUI, and was recently sentenced. So this is why this story came out. I think she was recently sentenced. Not sure how long. I don't do criminal defense anymore, so I don't really. I'm not really in a good position to comment on that stuff. But Sarah ended up being criminally charged too for, I guess, more or less obstruction, and so just not a smart idea. I don't know what they were thinking here, but um, yeah, real tragic situation. And what's interesting, what caught so anyway, what caught my attention about this was a couple of things. Now, I don't know the Amish community over there as well as the one around us here in Wisconsin, but I believe um, they have a they just have an absolute policy. They do not sue people. They so anytime you have one of these Amish buggy crashes, um, the Amish community will not pursue any kind of legal action against the driver, their insurance company. Um, I had a one of my partners who does insurance defense um, had a situation where they had hit an Amish buggy, killed someone, and were willing and prepared to pay their policy limits, but the Amish family would not take it. And so that's what's just so strange about it is they will not They will not take money even if you give it to them. Um, Now, maybe there's ways around it, but they won't take any kind of legal action against you as Amish. I've always wondered if there was the possibility of getting an assignment of the claim, but the Amish do not want to be in court. They will not take oaths. I had a jury trial, maybe 10, 15 years ago here in the county next to me. And there was, I believe, I'm trying to remember if they got called in for jury duty or not, but it was maybe not a full-fledged Amish, but I believe maybe they were Mennonite, um, and would not take the oath, the juror oath. They said, I think they say I can attest or something like that, but they are forbidden by their religious beliefs to swear and take an oath, which makes it difficult, if not impossible, to make them witnesses, because part of testifying in court is you have to swear under oath to tell the truth, and they cannot do that. They can affirm to tell the truth, but they cannot swear to tell the truth. So that's what, when you have these kinds of cases involving the Amish community, it's always a little interesting. Um, but what I wanted to talk about a little bit is, imagine this was not an Amish buggy, or they could sue if anyone was rear-ended here by this, whichever one of these young ladies that did this. This is kind of how it would normally work. So Minnesota has a no fault system. It's the only state, like in the three that I practice in, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, that has a no fault um, setup. It's required PIP benefits, personal injury protection benefits. I believe it is up to $20,000 for medical expenses, medical care, medical treatment, and I think 20,000 for lost earnings. And you have to. There are different procedures for how your claim proceeds depending on whether you get over a certain threshold of damages. Um, so it separates out, let's say, very minor or trivial accidents from more serious ones. Now, this one would obviously be in the serious ones. It would go through the normal district court process. But these, I believe. So let's say this Amish family was able to bring a suit. They would have a negligence and wrongful death claim against the driver that did this and their insurance company. Um, I don't know what would happen exactly if there was a dispute over who was driving, if they could theoretically go against both of their insurance companies. That's where the civil burden of proof versus the criminal burden of proof becomes very interesting. But wrongful death is a claim. You're entitled to damages for that, medical expenses, um, medical expenses, lost earnings, pain and suffering, things like that. Wrongful death claims in Minnesota, I believe, are brought by like an executor or a trustee of it. Um, and in I haven't handled a punitive damage case involving alcohol in Minnesota before, but at least in Wisconsin, it it used to be common for when you would have car accidents where the driver was drinking, to allege punitive damages. Under our old punitive damage statute, there used to be language, especially if you had multiple offenses. If it was a first offense, OWI, or a low blood alcohol content, maybe not. But I remember being involved in a number of punitive damage cases involving alcohol for car accidents, car crashes in the past. I'm not entirely sure what Minnesota's statute would allow. Minnesota, I believe, the last I checked, you can't actually allege punitive damages in your initial complaint. You have to start the lawsuit, do some discovery, and then seek leave to amend to include punitive damages. Whereas in, let's say, Iowa and Wisconsin, you can allege them from the very beginning. And I do sometimes allege punitive damages. So, yeah. How are you, Miss Taro? Um, it's got to be very early where you're at, um, or late, depending what the case may be. Let's see. Yeah. So just watch out for the Amish community. When you see it, when you see one Amish, just know there's going to be more, and they can be very hard to see. So you have to be very careful. So there's a question. Cases involving death are prosecuted by the state. Well, so yes and no. In most states, it is criminal cases are always prosecuted by the state. So that would be, and they were in this case. So like I said, the one Samantha, I believe. I don't know if they originally charged Sarah Peterson with homicide. I'm guessing they did. Even if she hadn't been drinking or anything like that, I think there's a decent chance that they charged her with some sort of homicide. So criminal. So there could be both criminal and civil liability from a crash, right? So there definitely was criminal cases pending here, um, for the wrongful death. It wouldn't necessarily. They could have brought criminal charges even without death, like just if there was severe injury here, they they could very well and may have charged them with some like reckless driving, or sometimes the degree of the criminal charge can depend upon the severity of the injury. So the criminal end of things will be pursued um, by the state. But then there's wrongful death cases. Wrongful death is a civil concept that deals with the right to pursue damages against someone for causing a death. It's basically a negligence case where there's a death. So we call that wrongful death. It's a personal injury type civil case, at least in my three states. But I imagine that's more or less true elsewhere as well. And the wrongful death is, I believe, in the past you couldn't you couldn't pursue damages for death, which makes no sense to me. Um, because the common law didn't have a theory or a claim for wrongful death. Um, and so it's statutorily based. So most states, I think, most states have a wrongful death statute, and they are going to be very specific about what that claim looks like, who could bring it. Like I said, in some states, you know, parents can bring the wrongful death claim, or a spouse could just bring a wrongful death claim against the person, against the responsible person. In some states, I believe in Iowa, excuse me, wrongful death claims are pursued by the estate. So you actually have to have an estate opened up, an administrator. A lot of times it'll be the same person, it'll be the spouse, surviving spouse, children, parents, whatever the case may be. And then the state, like in Iowa, brings the wrongful death claim on behalf of the beneficiaries. And then, like I said, in Minnesota, it's a little bit of a hybrid thing. I don't think I've had a wrongful death case in Minnesota, but there's like a trustee of some sort that gets appointed. So hope that answers that question. Um, yeah. I'm not. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I would be surprised if if the state gets involved in civil cases, which are just sort of by definition private parties. Um, but yeah, and a lot of states will have caps on wrongful death damages. So, like Wisconsin, we have a um, wrongful death cap. I'd have to look it up to make sure I got the right. It depends a little bit on the type of the claim and if it's the parent or child. Some states allow wrongful death damages to, like, if someone, let's say I passed away and my wife could bring a wrongful death claim, um, but not my children, even though my children obviously would sustain a loss if I was killed in a car crash. Whereas I believe in Iowa, at least, I think the law recognizes a claim for both. Whereas in Wisconsin, like I said, it's kind of the first level removed. So whoever is the next level of closeness to the person, that's where it stops. They have the right to those damages. I'm not sure Minnesota. I'd have to look that up. Um, so yeah, wrongful death actions are very state specific because they generally arise out of an actual statute that the state will enact in order to allow those claims to go forward. And you know, a lot of times you could have both, right? So you could have if someone isn't killed immediately and there's conscious pain and suffering, um, you can have what's called a survival claim and a wrongful death claim. The survival claim deals with, in at least in the three states that I practice in, deals with um, injuries sustained before someone passes away. So maybe they have to go to the hospital. Maybe they were conscious and could be experiencing pain and things like that. That's a claim in and of itself. And then if they, when they pass away, obviously that ends their own conscious pain and suffering, but then that opens the door for the wrongful death claim. And so you can have those two different claims. What's important to remember about that, so like, whereas I mentioned the wrongful death claim, there could be different people could bring that. Typically, if someone passes away, but they had a pre-death injury claim, that I believe, at least in, let's say, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, that it is the estate that has the right to pursue the survival claim. And for medical expenses, pain and suffering they incurred, and sometimes it could be for a very short period of time. um, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, I was live streaming about the Ford Pinto, the infamous Ford Pinto. Sometimes you can have people that have excruciating pain and suffering, but for a short period of time, if they were badly injured or burned in a crash, there can be a survival claim followed by a wrongful death claim. And the survival claim, the survival claim is generally, you need to check your talk to a lawyer about this, but generally the time on that generally starts running from the, let's say, the day of the accident itself, whereas a wrongful death claim usually starts running on the day of death. Now, the way I handle these is, excuse me, if at all possible, I try to just assume that the clock starts running on the day of the crash, even if they pass away afterwards, just to make sure I don't inadvertently miss a deadline. Because you can usually bring a lawsuit and bring both of those together. I had a I had a case a few years ago. Um, I had case a few years ago involving a gentleman who fell at a hotel, tripped on a misplaced rug, and injured his hip. Um, and so there was a personal injury claim for that, and then he ended up having to have surgery sometime later, maybe even a year later, and then ended up passing away as a result of complications from that hip surgery. So we actually had a wrongful death claim because his death, while not directly caused by the fall, was directly caused by treatment he was getting for the fall. And so we actually had a personal injury claim and a wrongful death claim that we brought together in one lawsuit. So that's typically how it would work. You wouldn't want those separated, I don't think, but that's a good question. So anyway, yeah, I don't talk a lot about wrongful death claims because I don't handle a ton of them. Um, but they're very very statute specific, very fact specific. So um, some states have um, more damages, like Iowa, for example, has pretty good damages available for parents of children that are killed. Like in this situation where these were children that were killed, if this had happened just a few miles south in Iowa, theoretically the parents would have a good claim for money that their children would have earned throughout their life. Whereas I don't believe that's necessarily something you can recover in Minnesota. But again, it's really important to talk to an attorney about that, because every state is different in terms of what kinds of damages are allowed and what kinds of damages are not. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate that comment. I do my best. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm going to have children waking up here shortly. Going to get the day started. I should be back tomorrow morning. Not sure if it'll be 5:30 or if it'll be a little later, but plan to I will plan to be live streaming tomorrow morning. So if anyone has any questions or comments, things you'd like me to talk about, especially if it's a current event or current story, let me know. I just need a little time to do a little research and make sure I got my points together before I hop on and live stream. So appreciate those of you that were in the live chat. Appreciate everyone who watches this after the fact. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.